our partners that are Impact. We are excited to have their support as we unlock the power of volunteerism together. Today is Giving Tuesday, so we have to make sure we give that plug out. We hope that you are participating and supporting and being part of this incredible day. So, a couple different options for Giving to Alive. You can go get a brand new exclusive shirt for Giving Tuesday, which is on our bonfire site. We also have a donation link. So, every donation matters. It helps support training, advocacy, and professional community. And the annual meeting is this Tuesday, December 4th from 1:30 to 3 p.m. We do need a quorum of 10% of the members, so 105, to do official voting on the new bylaws. So I encourage you to register for the event and attend and hope to see you there. And the National Summit on Volunteer Engagement is now open for early bird registration. So Alive members, it's $330 for full summit access. If you are a non-member joining us today, it's $430 and includes a 1-year Alive membership as well. So without further ado, I know we got started just a few minutes late due to some technical challenges. I'm going to kick it over to Heather to do her own introduction, and I'll be monitoring the chat. So Heather, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much. I'll get mine loaded. We'll make sure the computer will let me do that, and then I can introduce myself. I'm happy to be here with all of you. Let's see. The technology is fun. Here we go. Okay, I want to share that, and then we will do the slideshow. All right, you know why you're here. I'm going to speed through some of this because we did get a late start. You know why we're here. We want to talk about what do you do when you're shifting, your capacity is changing, you're shrinking, there's new ideas, there's a lot of activity and action. But how do you really navigate that uncertainty and the unknown with evidence to make decisions that are really going to impact your organization? That's what we're going to really dive into and focus on today. So I'm Heather Hiscox. My pronouns are she, her. I'm joining you from the lands of the Pasquayaki and the Tonaltam people in Tucson, Arizona. Today, it's a beautiful day outside. I'm the CEO and founder of Pause for Change, the creator of the Pause framework, which I'll touch on different elements today, and then author of the book No More Status Quo. So this is what it looks like. It's really a guide for frustrated change makers. It's the book I wish I had when I was working in all different parts of the sector, including working with wonderful volunteers. I hope you'll check it out if you're interested in learning more. But the No More Status Quo really came from these experiences. You might be able to relate to some of these. These were what I was running into in my work was, building solutions without input from people most impacted. I was expected to have like clarity and answers and concrete ideas when the problems and issues we were addressing were pretty murky and ever shifting. I felt pretty frozen by a ton of ideas that I could pursue. Sometimes in how fast we were moving, we were losing impact. And then sometimes we would design these amazing, what we thought programs, activities, and then they would fall flat, which is just a terrible feeling. So if you have felt any of these things, if you're currently taking any of these actions or feeling these emotions, you're not alone, and there's a better and different way to show up to the work. So I've had the honor of working with numerous different social impact organizations all over the United States. I mostly work with nonprofit and local government organizations, but people bring me in because they want to address uncertainty and these challenges using less time, fewer resources to achieve that greater impact. So it's been fun to work with small, tiny organizations and large national organizations. But this is the triangle that most people connect with my work. I call this the triangle of waste. So again, you may relate to some of this, but I want to lay the groundwork of the why behind these skill building that we're going to talk about. This is how we typically address uncertainty or problems in the sector. We start with sometimes an unstable foundation of we have a challenge that we don't really have clarity around, but there's an issue of some kind that's bringing up uncertainty, some hope. Maybe it's a new, exciting idea, but also some fear. We go into research mode. Research makes us feel really good. We can go find answers. We can look for best practices. We can talk to our peers. Usually we gather this information and we present it to a board member or leadership team within our organizations, and then they make a decision. And it's usually a one size fits all for all of our community, for all of our challenge. This is what we're going to do. And usually there's some sort of change management and planning that goes in of you're responsible by this deadline, and here's what we expect you to do, even though it's still a little murky. And then everyone goes into build mode, right? The staff are assigned. You might start fundraising or allocating funds. You're starting to look at those metrics because you're going to be held accountable. And then you're planning some sort of launch or reveal. You're solidifying partnerships. You're getting the website ready. You're kind of perfecting the solution behind the scenes. And at this point, this could have been months or even years that some people are working on these solutions. So you really can't go back. And then there's a ta-da. There's a grand reveal, usually then when it feels perfect enough or put together enough that you want to reveal to stakeholders. And this can be inside the organization or outside, external. So inside it might look like a new policy or new software solution that everyone has to be trained on and everyone has to use without your input. Or it can look like a ta-da program or new exciting idea or activity for community or partners to engage in. It's a little risky, and that's why I have it on this teeter-totter of a precipice where you start with an unstable foundation that could fall over. It's pretty risky because you've kept stakeholders outside of the design. The work that I'll talk to you about is all around co-design. So that left-hand side, you can see there's planning in progress, which feels like something is happening, which can take months or years, but you're really mounting this teetering triangle of resources, expectations, risk, and assumptions. This is just what I notice and I typically see in clients before I get to hang out with them. So we often feel like we're creating impact with the act of creating a plan or taking these steps, but we're confusing execution with impact. Just because we're moving forward with an idea doesn't mean it is the best idea or actually create the greatest impact. So this is the pause framework, and I'm going to lightly touch on the first three building blocks and then go deep into the fourth, solution testing. When I talked to your executive director, Nicole, when thinking about the content for this, she was saying, our folks are amazing. They know these basic elements. So that's why I'm going to touch on them lightly. And I want to go deeper in what might be sort of a new way of thinking. But we start with a stable foundation where we have alignment before we jump to solutions. We're identifying what we don't know to guide our learning. We're going deep and engaging with our stakeholders. We're brainstorming abundantly and testing solutions, actually trying to break them before we build anything. And then we're making decisions based on evidence, not based on pet projects or whims or what our directors might think will work. And we're co-designing all along the way with our stakeholders. So while you're increasing that planning and progress, it's more now like hours and weeks versus months and years. And it's increasing your clarity, confidence, and your learning. So this also, I want to show you, this is from the State Bar of California. It's small on purpose, but I also want to dispel the belief that learning is linear or that it's clean. Learning is messy. It is supposed to be winding. If you look at that sort of maroon shaped circle that's sort of a little bit off the center, that's where they started with these two problem ideas, these two questions they had. And if you look at those green turquoise colors, those were amazing solutions that weren't even on their radars that emerged from the learning. And some of those larger pink boxes were stop here. This is not a thing. Do not pursue. So I like to show this image to reinforce that we don't often get support for the messiness of learning, but we need it because it's essential. So let's dive into the first step, packaging the challenge. And I'm going to go briefly on these, but you all know how to choose a problem, right? Nicole is very confident that you might have problems such as these. How do I improve volunteer recruitment, onboarding, sustain engagement, right? How do I convert volunteer time to maybe making them a donor or even a legacy donor with their end of life and will planning, right? There's how do we include other departments to not forget about the volunteer team, which can often happen. So you're picking a challenge with clarity. The next part is we think about who's impacted, right? Volunteers are not all the same. You know this. Their motivation really varies. There's not a one size fits all for all volunteers. And what I've seen, are common buckets from organizations I've supported, or you might have folks that are retired, currently employed, young people, people that are required to go receive volunteer hours because they're court involved in some way, corporate groups that want to come help around the holidays and other activities, right? And then you have all of your adjacent partners, your leadership team, your staff, but you want clarity. When you have a problem, when you try to say everyone at once, it's really difficult. You want to focus on who's impacted that I'm going to put my attention on first, knowing that I'm going to keep learning and going deeper with these other groups as well. So after we have that clarity, we have a more stable foundation of our not triangle, but our solid column. We want to acknowledge that we don't know everything, right? Our work is full of biases, hypotheses, assumptions, but that's the fuel. The uncertainty is not what we fear or run away from. It's the fuel that drives our work. It starts to construct the roadmap for our actions. And I have additional slides for this section, but I want to just summarize what I often teach and tell my teams is that we're all biased, right? There's 180 forms of bias that have been put in academic journals and studied intensively. We bring our brains to work, right? Let's hope some days we have a bit less brain power than others, but we also bring our bias to work. We think we know what will work based on our lived experience, what we've seen work, or what we've maybe read about in another city. But it doesn't mean that that is the truth, and there's not space for other realities to join what actually could be impactful solutions. We just have to know, I know what I know, but I have these gaps that other people in my organization can fill and that I can fill with my learning. And why this is so important is that we are all designers. Even if you think I'm not really a designer, if you create something from nothing, a form, an event, a website, a gathering, you designed it and you can design it thoughtfully. And what that means is that as you design something, you're imagining a person's experience, which is really their future. What will they feel like when they look at that form? What will the website convey? What emotion does it bring up? What action can people take? Is there clarity? And it sounds like it's trite to talk about a website, but it really is navigating someone towards their future engagement with your organization. A form that feels a little too rough or confusing, it's going to really deter someone. An onboarding experience that feels a bit shallow and not very high touch, and all those different things are going to impact the experience that people have. So we have a lot of power. We have a lot of possibility to navigate with co-design amazing experiences from before someone ever gets started to hopefully a long-lasting relationship. So what I do with my teams is we lay out on the table what we don't know. We identify what's uncertain. We assume that we're wrong. And we celebrate success doesn't mean just building a program, but sometimes saying, this is not it. We're not going to invest our time in this, and we know why, and we have clarity now. That feels awesome. So we name all of our knowns and unknowns, and these are some prompts. And if you're thinking, I cannot write this fast, you will have access to all of these slides. So do not worry, sit back. I'll have you do a little bit of work, but don't freak out. So we ask prompts like, what do we know about this challenge? How do we know it's a challenge? What symptoms do we see? What's the background? What's been tried? What's working? What's not? Those are great questions. And if you have big question marks for those, you're like, I don't even know where this came from. I don't know. That's something to go learn about. Around your stakeholder, how do they talk about this challenge in their words? How do your colleagues think about it? How do community members think about it? What do they want? What's in their way? How are they currently solving the problem? What are examples and what's their experience been like? These are really helpful to get started. So I just filled out a pretend board around volunteer onboarding and training. And the stakeholder I focus on were retired folks to get narrow and specific. But let's say you know for sure that you've been using the same training for 5 years. It's the same slide deck, the same agenda, let's say. You're seeing a dip in the total number of volunteers. Around your stakeholder, you know that some volunteers only last a few months post-training. They might seem bored or disengaged during the training or onboarding activity. Volunteer attendance at the training has been lower than usual. And so let's look at the unknown column, what you still need to learn. How do we measure effectiveness of training, and have we been measuring it? How do we redesign the training so that there's some longevity around, how long the folks stick around, right? The volunteers stay engaged and really in love with your organization. And then the unknowns around your stakeholder is what do volunteers need and want to learn when they get started? Maybe they're just so excited they just want to get to action right away. They don't want to sit through something around, risk aversion and things. Are there ways to make the training more engaging where they get to form relationships and friendships and they get to know someone that's there right away? So they already start to create bonds. Who knows, right? These are big questions. How do we keep momentum? I'm sure you've thought about these things and you might have been working on training right now for your organization. But what we do is once we name everything we don't know, we get to honor a little bit of our own, knowledge and institutional memory, but we really lay it out. What do we not know? Then we go ask stakeholders. We go engage stakeholders because if we don't understand them, how do we really co-design impactful solutions that create value? If volunteers don't have a great experience, if your staff don't understand the power and possibility of volunteerism and the role that you contribute to your large organization, how are you really creating value for your colleagues and how are they going to create value for you? How are those volunteers going to stay deeply engaged? It's really essential questions and answers to be gathered. It's simple. We take our unknowns and we turn them into questions. We just say, how do we currently measure? How do other people measure training effectiveness? How have we done it in the past? What are all the different parts of how long do people stay? What seems to be a theme or a recurring experience for those volunteers that hang out for 5 to 10 years? You start to dive into these and you start to ask questions of those retired stakeholders, those retired volunteers. What do you want to learn as a new volunteer? What are you most interested in? What would really pique your interest? Or you could ask folks that are maybe newer and have gone through your onboarding, what was the most effective, the most useful information? What do you think was missing? What do you still need? Right? You ask people these questions and you ask a large enough group where you start to see themes and opportunities emerge for brainstorming. So now we're at the part where we're going to go deeper. That was the overview of packaging the challenge, assessing uncertainty, and understanding stakeholders. There's a lot more that goes to those. They're in the book. Not trying to pitch the book, but that is really where you would learn the step by step and a ton of different examples of what it looks like in real life. So you can check it out. But for this, with the guidance of Nicole, really want to focus on solution testing. And that's where you go deeper into the brainstorming section and testing. So brainstorming is usually where we start. We get to that triangle, we see that issue, we have that hope and fear and uncertainty, and we kind of freak out. We just start brainstorming. We're like, ideas, throw them on the table, pick one, go. And then we start to create that giant triangle of waste, which is tricky. We don't want to do that. That's that tiering, risky proposition. But it's normally where we start. We start to have that panic. It literally releases dopamine in our brains and our bodies and our systems that make us feel better when we make a decision. We don't like to be in uncertainty. And this part of what brainstorming does, it makes us feel good that we're taking action, but it's not informed by our stakeholders. It's informed by usually your insular group just popcorning ideas and you pick one. Not the best. So we want to shift to more of a solution testing mindset, and we want to be inclusive. Often I see only certain strata of members of the organization are included in brainstorming. And usually the folks that are most deeply engaged and connecting most with your partners and stakeholders aren't at the table, which is a missed opportunity. We want to operate from abundance. Sometimes people will brainstorm and say, okay, we have $5 and 5 minutes and 5 staff. What do we create? That's terrible, right? That's not going to give you an abundant potential idea. You want to go bold. You want to go big. And then with testing, you can really work into something that's realistic and that you have capacity to support. And with testing, you can know what will work before you even build it. It's the lean startup methodology that I bring into my work. You can test assumptions and try to break your solutions to reduce your risk. And you can learn quickly and get really creative and scrappy. And I'm going to tell you some stories and provide examples of what this looks like. And you're going to test it as well. You're going to try it. So this section is all about brainstorming abundantly and prioritizing potential solutions. I'll talk about how that works. We're not going to brainstorm now because you haven't done the work with your stakeholders. It's about designing ways to test your solutions, how to conduct rapid tests, and then infusing empathy and testing into that co-design experience. So when we do that one solution, when we say, okay, out of all the popcorn ideas, the whiteboard activity, this is the one thing we're going to do and we're going to build it. you kind of feel like you have to make it work. And that's when that resource investment and those high stakes and pressure get involved. But I want you to really take on this, you put on your lab coat that you are a scientist, you are an insatiable learner. And just like a scientist in a laboratory with controlled reagents and chemicals and setting and environments, they usually don't get their experiment correct the first time, right? There's learning, there's an explosion, there's smoke, a color changes unexpectedly. It doesn't work, right? Why would we get it right the first time working with amazing human beings, right? We were infinitely complex and fascinating and troublesome and wonderful, right? We have to give ourselves grace that we have our lab coats and we're here to test and try. We shouldn't be forced into making it work. So, what we do is lots of different brainstorming, and we come up with many ideas. Sometimes teams, after they've talked to 25, 30 different stakeholders, they might generate 40 different ways to actually create impact for those stakeholders. It's pretty phenomenal. There's no one idea, there's so many. And then we prioritize. If you're imagining, like, how do we do this? We have a 2 by 2 table that we use. So we say, okay, on that x-axis, which are kind of bright, new, bold, innovative ideas that would really capture the attention of our stakeholder. And this, again, can be an internal colleague, it can be external community member, partner. And then we also say on that y-axis, what would actually make a difference? Now that we know what people are looking for, what they most need, what would actually create impact? So our goal is to take our little sticky notes. You can draw 2 by 2 on a big white sheet of paper or on a whiteboard and say, okay, what's a big, bold idea in the eyes of the stakeholder, potentially, kind of a guess, and what would actually create impact? So we end up getting the best and brightest ideas in that upper right-hand quadrant, and we choose one which we call our first potential solution. And we leave the rest intact, knowing that we have this treasure trove of abundant ideas to go back to. So after we have our solution and our idea, this is where we get to the point where we don't treat it as precious, we treat it as one of many, and we're going to break it before we do anything. And what we do is we break apart the idea into its assumptions. So the giant triangle of waste is really a giant triangle of assumptions. They're embedded within all the work that we do and all the potential solutions we create. It's something we think we know without the data to back it up. And I'll illustrate with a couple examples. These are I always point to the back of my neck. These are the sayings that people will just utter very easily during my trainings. They'll say, oh, of course they'll do that. Oh, I'm sure that. I know that. And I become the pain in the booty who says, do you really know that? How do you know that? How do you know that if you create this program on a Saturday morning from 9 to 11 to teach X, Y, and Z outcome objectives, that people are actually going to come? How do you know that? How do you know that that creates value? How do you know that's connected to your mission and values and goals in the ways that you think it is? So then we get to go and test those assumptions. So the story I want to tell you is based on an organization. I'll stop sharing just for a second so you're not staring at a bed for a couple minutes. Hopefully you can see me. Um, this was an organization, a funder had come to me in year 3 of funding. And this organization, this foundation had spent it was $500,000 supporting over 3 years this collaborative group project program. And what it was connecting volunteers, these really lovely volunteers in the community, with community members who lived alone and were being discharged from the hospital after an illness or injury and had no one at home to help them. So they had no one to go get their prescriptions, no one to fill the fridge with food or, prepare some easy snacks for them, no one to take them for their repeat hospital visits or doctor's visits. So you can imagine these people, these poor individuals that were all alone, had these high rates of re-injury and re-hospitalization. And so this main nonprofit that was, helping with these volunteers and these connections was working with these different medical centers and hospitals within this community to connect the dots and say, hey, if you have a patient who's going home alone, please call us, let us know, and we will connect them with a loving volunteer who will help them and we will improve, everyone's lives, right? This will be great. So it sounded wonderful. They had MOUs signed by all these different organizations. The first year they had some enrollment. The second year started to go down. And by year 3, when they brought me in, which was very, very late, it was terrible. The relationships were fractured. The enrollment was abysmal. It was terrible. So our job was to try to figure out what was going on. And what we learned and what we realized is that from the very beginning, the focus was really on the amazing volunteers, right? And make sure you have human capacity to do the work. And it was focused on a little bit on the patients, of course, but on the medical side, the hospital leadership, the CEOs that were responsible for signing their names on those agreements that would go into the grant proposal. People absolutely forgot about the referral staff that worked within those medical settings. They would have to say, I have a patient that fits your description and call and connect them with that nonprofit. They had completely forgotten about that individual. So you can see how that is highly problematic. And what's really sad about the whole thing is that, and hopefully you can see my slides again. What was sad about that is there were only a couple hundred people in the community that were supported. When if there was a more thoughtful way that this could have been co-designed, would have been much more successful. So the assumptions and how I want to continue talking through this example is we look at assumptions and we say, what must be true? Here's how we identify assumptions. What must be true for the stakeholder to derive benefit from the potential solution? So, in this case, if we say the stakeholder is the referral staff member, that individual that works in those medical settings that has to make the call, what must be true for that person to actually experience value themselves and to make that connection? And so we started to list those. And these were some of the items we came up with. Simple. The referral staff have to know about the program. They have to have information about the program. They have to have a poster or a website or brochures handy to talk to the patient and to even make the phone call. They have to have time to share information about the program. They have to be willing to do it. Even if they know about it and they have hours of leisure, they have to still be compelled to want to do it. They will make the actual connection and then they'll keep up to date, right? Let's see, there's changes in the program. They'll stay with it. So what was interesting is we started interviewing these referral staff. And what we learned is that there's very high turnover. About every, I don't even know, year, these people leave because it's very high stress. The pressure is to empty those beds and get the next person in. It's because of the high turnover, the staff, the leadership above these staff members did not really put into place into their new onboarding of new staff to talk about the program. So that institutional knowledge, of course, was very murky. So it was so interesting that the person that was most important was really left out. And there's a lot of different steps that they have to take. And you can see how some are extremely fundamental and connected to each other. So I've given you the example of assumptions that must be true for that one solution to work for the connection of the volunteers. And I want you to take a couple minutes and just take a sheet of paper, sticky note on your desk, whatever you have. And I just want you to think about a current or potential solution that you're working on. It can be a program, an idea, something you currently have in action. What assumptions do you think are embedded in that solution? What must be true? So think about your solution and the stakeholder. What must be true for that stakeholder to experience value, to really create impact and to experience impact from your potential solution? And I like to start each of my lists with stakeholder will, or in this case, it could be retired volunteer will or referral staff will. You can put the specific name or group of stakeholders. But I want you to take just a couple minutes. We'll take 2 minutes because we are compressing this. And I want you to do that work. Start to practice yourself. So take 2 minutes and start to make a list of assumptions. And then we're going to be sharing in just a second. So go ahead and do that. I'll set a timer. Okay, that was just a couple minutes. I know it probably went quickly. I'm sorry, it was quiet. We didn't have music playing in the background. I'm going to stop sharing, and I would love anyone to, you can put your thoughts in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, Amy can probably help me. I would love to hear from anyone who wants to share. What are some assumptions you came up with? And we're going to take just about, 4 minutes or so, but anyone want to share what their potential solution is and any assumptions, either in the chat or unmute and come on in. We'll wait a little bit if no one's shy. And if not, I can share another quick example. Okay, while you're thinking, I'll share a quick example from a client I'm working with now. They are building an internal mentorship program where our internal colleagues across departments, it's in a city, will mentor each other and start to form these connections as a way to increase, stickability of people within the organization, stick with their roles. But some of the assumptions were people will sign up for a mentor, they will fill out the bio and the background and that little short form because we figured just to say, oh yeah, sure, I'll go. We need to do a little bit more. We kind of heighten that hurdle. They will fill out the form. They will meet with their mentor. They will fill out the satisfaction survey afterwards, and they will continue to meet with the mentor and repeat visits. So those are just some of the basic assumptions that started to pop up for us. And it's really key to pull these out for behavior because we just think, oh, this will be great. This will come together. But there's so many pieces that we overlook and we need to test. Anyone have ideas now that they want to share, either in the chat or want to unmute? Okay, Mark. Rebuilding the volunteer program, and I'm meeting with program directors and VPs. My assumption was that all programs would gladly welcome volunteers, but I got surprised by a couple that flatly said no, or they haven't said yes yet. Yes, exactly. It's interesting. One of the things I've learned in this work is that we assume that everyone will want what we have to offer. Like they want to come to every program, they want to participate in every intervention that we design. But I think of it as like you go to a grocery store, you don't buy everything in there, you buy the things that solve a problem or increase joy and satisfaction. You don't buy everything. And so, just as if community members are really looking for help, they don't need or want to participate or can't even participate in many of our programs. It's a big assumption that we make. So that's lovely to share, and I hope it works out. I hope you can start to make those relationships with them and then, deal with the data that's there in front of you. All right. Well, I will keep sharing my slides, but if you come up with anything as I'm going forward, please put it in the chat and we'll touch upon it. All right. So just like with all of our different potential solutions, you might come up with 15, 30 different assumptions. So we want to prioritize them again because we do not have all the time in the world, right? We have to be really cautious about our resources that we're using. So on the x-axis, you can see which assumptions are most unknown. Which one are you like, I don't really know what people want to do or even think about. Okay, yeah, that's pretty uncertain. Or things that might go to that other side of the x-axis. You might think, actually, we do know that. We do have that knowledge. We've tried that before. Okay, I'll kind of scoot that sticky note over. And then the exclamation point signifies which are most critical. If this is not true, this dissolves. This solution is not going to work, right? It's not going to work. And I'll talk you through the solution, the testing that we did. I'm just double checking the chat. Okay. All right. Bronwyn, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Expanding our offer for corporate volunteer opportunities assumes that there is demand out there of orgs who can meet our donation requirement. Absolutely. I've actually worked on a couple different corporate volunteer projects. It's not as easy as it used to be. It's sort of that United Way-ish model is transitioning and moving, and how corporate employees are getting sort of mark the boxes for their volunteer engagement is really different because they're engaged in different ways. And, volunteerism, as you all know, because you're experts, is changing. So absolutely. And then Carol, My program sends older adults into schools, childcare centers, and after-school programs. I order supplies, games, learning stuff, etc. for grandparent goodie bags. Oh, for the foster grandparents to take with them to use with the kids in supplement learning. I assume the volunteers would use them and the kids would be interested. Yeah, maybe you buy one. You put one kit together, and that can be the test. And then you have to know, what are you even measuring? What do you need to see? Are you measuring, how the foster, oh, 60. Oh, okay. You did a bit of a giant triangle, but that's such a great illustration. I really hope it works. And I have my own goodie bag story. Oh, I made all these goodie bags in this maternity ward at one point, and that did not work. But I really hope it does for you. And you gave such a great example of how do we do micro tests of some of these ideas, right? How do we start small before building out a whole program? The mentorship program example I just shared, it's not an entire program. It was like an Excel spreadsheet that people would populate by clicking a link. And we're just sort of randomly matching people to get it going. And it had great success. So then we knew, oh, we're getting a signal that there's something here. So if you start small, you're looking for those key signals. But thank you for sharing that, Carol. So the point of this is, as I've illustrated, we need to move past these words or promises of what we think people will do and what people even say to us. Oh, I'll be there. I'll show up. I'll participate. Because we're asking people to invest their precious time, energy, and resources with us. So it's really great to test and refine at that small scale and to really honor and reward those individuals as early testers to say, we don't know all the answers. We need beautiful people like you to really help us learn. So thanks for being our co-design learning partner. And we're going to take your feedback, whatever it is. We're sort of solution agnostic, and we're going to build with that and really keep learning about what we should do next. So again, we're wearing our lab coats. We are scientists. We design a hypothesis. Remember your, old science classes. If we In this case, we're making some offer. If we provide these learning kits, these goodie bags, that if we offer, volunteer support and connection, we expect that people will. You would want them to love the goodie bags, right? Like you spelled it out perfectly, Carol. Excuse me. That they'll be excited to use it. They will use it. They'll understand how to use it. That the person they're working with will enjoy the activities. And what are the signals of enjoyment? How do we measure that, right? It's making us be really thoughtful about the action that we're seeing. Some of this is observable, and some of it is, written, or other experiences can be quantitative and qualitative, and I'll talk about that. But we want to design our hypothesis. So in the example that I gave you, that we were clumping together two different assumptions, that referral staff know about the program and have the information about it. And so this was our design. If we, the fill in the blank part was ask referral staff to share what they know about the program and show us the program materials, that they will have the knowledge and resources on hand. Simple, right? And we knew this was so risky. If this was not true, the whole thing falls apart. And so that second part, you can see the action that they had to take was they had to show us the goods, right? They had to say, oh, this is a great program with volunteers and it's for these types of patients, and here's a brochure. That was our ideal case. And when we conducted this, goose egg, zero out of all the people, all the referral staff, not a single person knew what we were even talking about, had never heard of the program. And the nonprofit was just blown away. They thought, oh my gosh, we never thought that was the problem. We kept going to the CEO and to the leadership to say, can you like step up your game? Why aren't we getting referrals? And I interviewed actually the leadership of each of those healthcare centers, and they told me in confidence that they actually didn't believe the program worked, that they didn't think they had the right volunteers, especially bilingual volunteers in certain parts of the community that were closer to the neighborhoods that were most in need. Fascinating. They never shared it with that nonprofit leader of the program. They never shared it with the funder. They all just said, oh, yeah, we signed the MOU. We're partners. But their behaviors were not partner behaviors. They were not partner actions. They weren't truthful and honest. And so, who got impacted were these community members in need, while the politics and the frustration and lack of communication started to dissolve this entire coalition. I know you've probably seen this in real life, and this is not my only example of this happening. So again, when we go to test even our partnerships, I have a whole handout on my website about the 20 questions to ask your collaborative partner before you get started. There are assumptions embedded within our programs. There are assumptions embedded within our partnerships. We have to have some of these critical conversations early because $500,000 to support a couple hundred people, my goodness, right? It could have been so successful. I'll tell you a good story. That's sort of a sad tale. I'll tell you a good story. I was working with the United States Swim School Association, and they're the nonprofit that provides guidance and support for swim schools. If any of you have littles in your lives, at some point they might have been at a swim school, and they were learning as a pain point when they started interviewing their members that onboarding new staff, right? A lot of them were high school and college students, young folks that would come in and teach the littles how to swim and do all those activities. There are some information bits that they could learn in a class, and then a lot of it was obviously in the water with the instructor. So the leaders of these different swim schools across the country said, if we could streamline the classroom learning, I can do the water part. It's really time consuming for me to sit in the classroom and be out of the water when some of these could be virtual modules. Y'all have something like that? And they kind of did. They had bits and pieces of an idea that never really came together and came to fruition. So what they did is they did the work. It was pretty basic. It was probably, I would say, like 70% perfected and completed, but it had the basic modules that across all of the states in the US had as like basic requirements. And how they tested it was they said, okay, people have told us they want this. We're not going to perfect it and we're not going to get it to 100% right now, but we're going to get it most of the way there so we ethically can offer this as a real service and product. But at our annual event, our annual meeting that they had every year, like your conference, your summit that's coming up, they had one of those. They offered it an introductory offer of $99. They said, okay, if you would like to sign up your swim school, it's $99. It gets you these different things. They showed a slide on the screen, probably had a QR code. They talked about it a couple times at the summit. They sold $30,000 worth of early memberships to this online platform in a day because people they address such a pain point that people were just ripping it out of their hands, right? People were like, yes, oh my gosh, I can be in the pool more. I can work on my business development and outreach more, my marketing. Awesome. Let's do it. So that not only gave them the capital to refine the product to make it even better, to get it to 110%, but they got a massive signal that they were on the right page, they were in the right pathway, and their membership loved that they had been listened to and they had been designed for them and with them in many cases, which was fabulous. So I want you to think about, and I'll just do a short time for this, so we have time for Q&A. Think about a risky assumption and how you would design your first solution test. So again, we won't do it too much now, but think about that fill in the blank and you'll have the slides. If we blank, we expect that people will, and then there's the behavior. There always needs to be an offer. I am offering you this, and you're going to respond with this in an ideal situation. Okay. I want you to think about that. And what we do is because we're scientists and we have our lab coat, we have our lab notebook, and we're watching, we're documenting our data, right? If we expect that everyone's going to love those goodie bags, Carol, they're just going to love it. Kids are just going to be thrilled. They're going to want to take it home with them. The volunteers just going to think it's the best thing ever, and they're going to ask for 3 more, right? You're going to have the data and observations and those insights, those aha moments that will be generated. And it's quantitative, right? Let's say you reach out to 20 people to get started, 5 people to get started. What are the quantitative numbers? And then the qualitative, what did you learn? What did you observe? What was sort of what we think is like the softy, feely, noticings and impressions? And then why do you think you got the results you did? And this is what takes us into the last part of the pause framework, evidence. We have to decide, what we're going to do with the data and the feedback. So success can mean learning. That's great. We have clarity on why something worked or not. And then we could get to guide our leadership and our decision making. And so we want to know why it's viable so we can communicate that and invest more resources. But we want to know, or sorry, the other one was let it go, right? We want to let it go if it's not going to work, but we want to know why it's fantastic. It just makes sense. It's common sense. So we can go deeper. And what I love about this is it gives you power. It's not just leadership or board members saying, we decided this. It gives you data to say, I also thought that was a cool idea, but we talked to 20 people and no one said that. And we've tested it with 20 more and nobody wanted it. What do you want to do? And you'll probably have information to say, here's what I recommend as an alternative. Let's move forward with this. I've never had a leader ever shut a team member down because they have the data to back it up, which is very exciting. Thank you so much, Rowan, for joining. We're almost done with it. We'll go to Q&A. So we have a decision to make with our evidence. We can iterate, pivot, or persevere. So iterate means we ran the test on a Friday afternoon of a holiday weekend. Probably wasn't the best because no one was in the office or people weren't responsive. It's probably okay. Your test is probably strong, but you need to tweak it. That's iterate. Pivot is goose egg 0 out of 0, a very poor response based on what you expected. Then you have to go back to that drawing board and say, okay, what is it about my solution, my understanding of the stakeholder, or this challenge that might need to be tweaked? And then persevere means you're the swim school. You just made 30 grand. You are rocking it. Let's go. Let's finish that. Let's come up with more videos to share. That's great. So you want to make a decision based on that data. And we keep iterating, just like that picture with the web of all those different colorful boxes and ovals. That's the messiness of learning. So that's why we want to test and we get to flow through these different skills. We get to say, okay, we need clarity on our challenge. What else do we need to learn? Let's go back and understand our stakeholders. Let's test a couple more solutions and ideas and assumptions that are built into those. And let's keep this powerful conversation where everyone has access to power in the organization to share the evidence and make those decisions. So it's really about shifting and pausing. And you can see those pause points that grade in space. That's the time where you slow down, you reflect, you communicate, you gather more to make these powerful and impactful designs and decisions. So I hope I've influenced your thinking about solutions and you're keep doing that amazing work you're doing with engaging your volunteers, learning about what everyone needs, and then pausing to work differently, especially in that solution stage. So I'm going to open up to questions. I'm going to stop sharing so we can see each other. You can see me at least. Anyone have questions, please pop it in the chat, raise your hand, any way that I can help if you want to talk about something specific. I'm here to help. And I'm also going to put my email in the chat if you're shy or you think you need a little bit more time to marinate on this. I'm going to put my email and then you can definitely reach out to me. Please, please, please. No cost, any of those things. You just contact me and we get to hang out. Anyone have questions or comments? Thank you, Angela. Good to see you. I wish I could see you, but good to know that you're there.
Definitely have had some really great comments in the chat box. So that's always exciting to see those.
Yeah. Thank you. We have 2 minutes if anyone else has questions. Otherwise, we can wrap and you can reach out to me at your leisure. And all the free time you have, running your entire programs. I'm here to help.
Well, I don't know that I see any more, but we just wanted to say thank you so much. I've loved the intentionality behind the pauses and the work that you shared with us and the invitation to continue to connect. And then thank you so much to all our attendees for being here. And we would love to get your feedback. There's a QR code on the screen that if you will take a few minutes to scan and give us some feedback, we would appreciate it. We will see you all hopefully on Thursday for the live annual meeting so we can go through that important work. And then again, back for our Academy in in January. So thank you so much for being with us. And again, reach out if you have any more questions. We'd love to connect.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Take good care.